If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What was the creepiest thing you witnessed that made you believe in supernatural stuff? My grandparents' house was a very active location. It was built in the early 1900s. There is an elderly man there who you can visibly see a lot. Sometimes he was at the bottom of the steps going down to the basement. There is a younger woman who is seen on the second story. We think this is his daughter. Doing research on the house, she passed away around 17 years old of tuberculosis. Their last names were Whitaker, if I remember correctly. We have seen stuff move. We saw a picture frame lift up from the wall and fall to the ground a couple feet out once. When my mom was a kid, she saw the two front chandeliers swinging in exact sync. A lot of the activity tends to happen when there is a lot of people there. So maybe they just don't like all the commotion. Oh, and the night my other grandmother died, I was probably 8 or 9. I apparently told my mom that Mama had been sitting on the end of my bed and told me she loved me and then got up and left. She had died that night. I saw a shadow person. I was at my friend's apartment building, which his parents owned. It was a pretty old building in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, and according to his dad it used to be owned by Al Capone, but I'm not sure how true that was. We had an apartment on the top floor that they let us use to just hang out, and it allowed us easy access to the roof so we could go smoke cigarettes. One night, we were about to go up, but I had to pee, so I told him I'd meet him up there. After I was done, I went up the stairs to the attic portion that was connected to the roof. There were no lights, so we always used our phones to guide us. We had those old flip phones without lights, so you only had the light from the screen to help navigate the cluttered mess that was up there. As I made my way to the roof door, I saw a shadow pass by me. Now this wasn't like the shadow of something moving with the light of my phone, this shadow felt solid like a person. I followed the direction it went thinking it was my friend. I kept saying that I knew it was him and to stop playing around. It passed me a few more times, before heading to the other side of the attic, and that's when I heard my friend's voice from downstairs. He got a call from his girlfriend and was in another room talking to her the whole time. It really freaked me out, since I know I was following something, so I basically jumped down the stairs. I told my friend what happened and that I did not want to go back up there, and he agreed, so we decided to go for a walk instead. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I was 10 or 11, I used to hear footsteps in the landing/hallway outside my bedroom. I told my mom about it and she told me it was just the floorboards expanding and shrinking from the heat. I kind of believed this explanation but not really, but then everything stopped, no footsteps and no nightmares or feeling uncomfortable at night. I felt an unnatural presence. Then about a week later I heard the footsteps again. I was scared and then they came to my door and I seen a shadow, so I instantly turned around. I faced the wall, but then the footsteps came into my room and then whatever it was made its way over to my bed, and I was whimpering and sweating intensively but also feeling cold at the same time, and then my mom shouted upstairs, "WHO's out of bed." I shared a room with my brother. I was scared shitless and was crying. I called my mom upstairs and told her about it, and she was confused and swore she heard footsteps. This experience still confuses and scares me to this day. If you don't believe it, you don't believe it. Lawrence Hotel, downtown Dallas. Now La Quinta. 10th floor. All the way down the hall, door on the right. We got a hotel there one night as a friend was in town visiting. That's where they put us. First thing I noticed was the windows opened up halfway. Odd to me. As we hung out talking and watching TV, the fire alarm kept going off. Called downstairs and was assured it was a prankster and not a fire. This around 3 a.m. It persisted for 3 separate times, then stopped. 30 minutes later we hear a little girl crying. Loudly. Like next to our door. Every time I swing the door open it's just stopped. About after 3 to 4 times I called downstairs again and asked them to wake up the parents as their kid was crying. Their response: "Nobody is on that floor but you guys." I tied my shoes tight as possible, and sprinted down the hall. I pushed elevator and waited, terrified to look back, when I noticed the door to the stairwell and took that down. Busted into the hotel lobby, startling the two in the front working. I yelled, "This bitch is haunted," and left. Coming to find out it is haunted. And that room had a little girl fall out years back. She does all that to get you to switch rooms. Also had a suicide, murder, and other things happen in that hotel, mostly on that floor. Good times. My brother and I were exploring an old abandoned paper mill one night. I had been there dozens of times and my brother had probably been 2 to 3 times. All of those times had been during the day, as the place could be really dangerous if you didn't know the layout. You could literally fall 3 stories onto rubble and steel or get lost in the many ever-dark subterranean corridors. Anyway, this particular night we had all the appropriate gear with us to just hang out, smoke a few bowls and have a few drinks while listening to home music. We were in a huge open room that had several dead-end rooms off of it at the back and corridors that lead out the other 3 directions. We had everything set up in the back room as it was cold in there and the acoustics were best with our tiny speaker. There was a designated pee spot just out the corridor, as it led outside, which is where I went to relieve myself, leaving my brother alone in the big room dancing to the music. I was maybe a minute and a half tops, but on the walk back I noticed the music has stopped, which was weird as the speaker and my phone both had near full charge. Now keep in mind it's pitch black outside the flashlight beam except for a few glow sticks placed around the back wall. As I walk into the large room I see my brother 20 off to my right facing the wall slowly kicking some loose rubble/debris at it. He's got a weird hunch to him as if he's sifting through the debris looking for something, probably his lighter. I'm thinking, he's dropped. I turn my light off as I take my next few steps to get a fresh beer. I'm about 10 to 12 behind him now. I can clearly hear the sound of him shuffling through what sounded like shale. I asked him something like, "Did you lose your lighter, or a bud or something?" No response. My words echoed. Just more foot shuffling with his back to me. At this point I thought he was just fucking around trying to give me a scare. Anyway, I laughed and told him it was a good try and my next words were frozen in my throat. I hear a booming what? From over my left shoulder. It was my fucking brother. I instantly went white, felt my heart drop and broke into a crazy sweat all in a half second. I whipped around to see him coming through the other corridor, glow stick around his neck and beer in hand. I was shaking and thought I was going to throw up for about 5 minutes after that. It turns out he had to pee as well and just went down the other way. I have no idea how to explain what I saw or heard that night, but I know for sure I did experience it. To this day I'll hear that certain tone of the rocks kicked across the ground in an almost echo chamber and it gives me chills. My brother was so freaked out that I was so freaked out that we packed up and left immediately. He thought I was trying to freak him out. It was another 10-minute walk to get off the property and we were talking about what had just happened. He hadn't seen or heard anything unusual except for me talking to myself. I asked him why he shut the music off if he was only going for a pee, which he thought I did while he was gone. This was when Bluetooth was still pretty expensive to have a decent speaker, so it was a wired unit. Neither of us touched the phone and everything was working properly and charged up. We listened to music all the way home. This was just over 10 years ago and I still get freaked out when I think about it. When I was a kid we lived in a double-wide trailer for about 8 years. My room was definitely haunted by some kind of paranormal force. I had 4 distinct experiences happen living there. The first one happened when I invited a friend over to play action figures. I was about 11 at the time. The only people in the house were my mom, in the kitchen, my friend and I, playing in my bedroom. We were playing away and heard something fall or crash in my closet. We stopped playing for a second and kept playing, then, bang, another crash. So I grabbed my baseball bat from under my bed and my friend and I approached the closet to check out what was going on. As we were about to slide the closet open and check it out, the whole thing started to violently shake. I dropped the bat and we ran out of that house so fast, right past my mom who was the only one besides us home. I told her what happened and slept in her bed for a few nights before returning to that room, and more things continued to happen over the years until we moved. I've always kinda believed in supernatural things, but one experience cements it. About 8 years ago, I had some friends over to chill.
It was me and my friends EF, CF, and BM.
We were sitting in my living room listening to music and talking when my friend B stopped us talking and asked me to turn the music down. When everything was quiet, I heard what sounded like someone with heavy boots walking around on my front porch. B got up and opened my front door. There was no one on the porch. We kinda shrugged it off as an animal. Living in the boonies is awesome. We went back to the music and convos when I suddenly heard the heavy footsteps again. I turned the music down and E looked out the window and saw nothing. At that same moment, C stood up and grabbed the broom I had in my kitchen and started creeping toward the door. Right as she got to the door and was about to unlock it, something hit the door with enough force that it made the windows shake. C jumped halfway across my living room and B jumped up off the couch and pulled the door open so fast I was sure he ripped it off the hinges. There was nothing there again. The house in question sat in the middle of 2.5 acres and there was absolutely no way in hell anyone could run off that fast. We would have seen if anyone was running off the porch and around the house or through the front yard. After that experience, it became the norm for me to hear people walking on the front and back porch late at night. Soon after that, I was seeing shadow figures in my house just walking around. My oldest kid one time told me there was a man and dog in my closet. Things were moved about, and went missing all the time. I don't know what it was about that night that started all the paranormal stuff, but it continued the whole time I lived there. I've had many other experiences since then, just not as intense. When I was in high school, we got a film project over Aztec mythology and my friends and I asked for permission to record in school grounds after hours. We were quite excited because this particular school had a history, and we liked to speculate and dabble with paranormal stuff. For some background, the school was in Mexico and was founded a long time ago by the Sisters of the Sacred Heart as a girls' boarding school. There were of course rumors of ghosts and spirits as well as tunnels which were purportedly connecting it to the town's cathedral. While I never got too far into the tunnels, the buildings themselves were interesting enough because they were at least 100 years old. As is expected of a creepy Catholic school, there were tons of stories of suicides, apparitions, girls trying to summon the devil, a haunted chimney, etc. Anyway. There was also a forested area that belonged to the school but was undeveloped because it was basically on a cliff. It was fully fenced and walled off. Think concrete and expensive chain link fencing which was sturdy, intact, and extremely tall. This is where we set to record. Before we went down into this area, we made sure to inspect it from the top. Nothing. There was a gate we had to unlock to even get to it, making it impossible for anything else to get in there. After we finished fucking around and accomplished jack shit because we were just exploring, we went back up and peeked down to make sure we were forgetting nothing. It was at that moment that we saw this huge black dog. I love dogs, but something about this one really freaked me out, and I still remember being paralyzed with fear. To me it looked like it was looking for us. We ducked. After a few seconds, we peeked back up the wall and it was gone. It fucking disappeared. We had walked all around the fence and saw no openings and no signs of anything else being there. The next day, me and some friends went back down and checked. Still no openings. I am pretty convinced that what we saw was not a living dog. I still get the chills thinking about it. I saw other things in that school, but that was definitely the absolute worst. My childhood bedroom was haunted, I'm sure of it. I had a lot of nightmares in there, sleep paralysis, etc. Every single person who has ever spent the night in that room has felt something negative in it. Friends that I had sleepovers with, my parents, visiting family members. All would say they felt something weird in the room, or that they slept awful. I would wake up and the closet door would be open just a smidge, even though I always made sure it was closed before going to sleep. Eventually I had my dad put up a curtain over it so I couldn't see the door at night. I would also wake up with scratches on my legs. I will disclose that I had a dog and a cat, but neither slept with me in that room at the time. It was also considered the guest room, and some of our family is allergic so the animals weren't allowed in there, and my cat's previous owners had her declawed before we got her. My dad also got his chest scratched once when he slept in there. I had such terrible anxiety in that room that I started to sleep with my parents at age 13, or I would sleep on the couch downstairs just to avoid being in there. I swear one night I felt something touch my arm, and when I opened my eyes I saw a hand pulling away from me. I don't live in that house anymore, thankfully. As soon as I moved out I stopped having sleep paralysis and those terrible nightmares. One night I was babysitting my niece while my sister and her boyfriend were out. We weren't in the greatest neighborhood at the time, so being alone in the house at night with only a 3-year-old for company was already a little creepy. To set up the stage here, it was a house from the 50s, and was tri-level. The top level had 2 bedrooms, my niece's bedroom, and her parents' master suite. Middle level had the kitchen, dining room, living room, bathroom, and sunroom, and the bottom floor was the den, another bedroom, a half bath, and the basement. From the couch in the downstairs den, you could see right up the stairs to the middle level. Here's what happened. It was about midnight or so, I don't remember the exact time, but I remember it had been dark for a few hours, and I'd long since put my niece to bed. All of the doors and windows had long since been checked and locked, so I went to the downstairs den to watch TV for a while. After a couple of hours, I saw a flash of toddler-sized white movement go across the top of the stairs. I'd put my niece to bed in one of her dad's white undershirts as a nightgown, so I thought it was her. I called out niece's name, "Go back to bed." A few minutes later the same thing happened, but she stopped at the top of the stairs. I looked up, and what I saw scared the ever-loving shit out of me. It was a small, toddler-sized white creature. Completely smooth, no hair or anything anywhere, and it had a big round almost featureless head. No nose, but it had a freakishly wide, thin mouth filled with tons of needle-looking teeth, and small, beady black eyes that were spaced way too far apart. I froze while I was looking at it, and it just stood and stared at me with that wide-ass grin for a minute before it turned and ran away. I got up and ran upstairs as fast as I could to check on my niece, and searched the whole house over. No windows or doors had been unlocked, and of course I didn't find anything. I personally never saw anything like that again, but I have a couple of friends who saw similar things. One of my friends stopped me mid-sentence while I was describing, and finished describing it to a fucking T based on something he claimed to have seen. Freaky shit. I have a friend who I used to be roommates with when I was in the university. We used to share an apartment with 2 other friends and we all went to the same university. So this particular friend was a very normal guy and he was the smartest amongst us all and a straight A student. He would be totally normal until somebody mentioned something about ghosts or anything supernatural. He would then become very serious and asked us to change the topic, and he never watched any horror movies. One day we bugged him to tell us why he gets so disturbed by even a mention of supernatural things. After a lot of pestering he gave up and then confessed to us that he can actually see Gene's supernatural entities made of fire, from time to time. He said that the sightings were not regular, they happen once in many months. We asked him many questions and he answered with utmost seriousness. Obviously we didn't believe him and laughed about it even though it was very unlike him. He was not the kind of a guy who would make up shit like that. Anyway, as days passed by, we would often mock him and joke about his supernatural buddies. He would always say that we don't have to believe him but would plead us not to joke about it. And he used to say that he hopes none of us ever get to see what he has seen. So a few months later, our semester at the university had just ended. And we decided to go for a last night out before we got busy with our summer jobs. We watched a movie, had dinner and went to this hookah place before calling it a night. Only one of us had a car and we always carpooled. When we got back we couldn't find a parking spot as we lived in the city and parking was tight in our apartment complex. So me and this particular friend got dropped off at the parking lot while the other 2 friends drove off to park the car somewhere on the street. We started walking towards our place through the parking lot. It was a L-shaped parking lot behind the apartment complex, with the apartment building on the left and a wall on the right. It was a pleasant summer night and we were having a normal conversation probably about the movie we had watched earlier. As soon as we got to the end of one side and turned left to the shorter length of the L, my friend just froze and looked absolutely terrified. I asked him what was wrong and then he pointed towards a dumpster and said to me that he can see one right now sitting next to the dumpster. I looked where he pointed and all of a sudden it felt as if the temperature suddenly dropped many degrees below. And I could see something over there. I can't describe it, it was not like a person, it was not an object but it was there, not clear, but I could tell someone or something was there, looking right back at me. My friend grabbed my arm and pulled me and we got back to the apartment as fast as we could. We never spoke about it again. I am pretty sure I saw something, it was not an illusion, there was something there for sure. Many years have passed now and my friend is married and a father of 2 kids. And he still says that he can see them from time to time. But we have never discussed about that night again. I was in the Navy years ago. I was on aft watch rotation one week when we were deployed. Put simply, I stood at the back of the ship and watched for jumpers, mostly. I went back one early morning to relieve a shippy of her duty and she said there's something really weird back here. Instinctively, I turned around and immediately zeroed in. Only feet from us, on a raised deck, sitting directly in front of one of the big visibility lights that were lit to signal location to other ships was the form of a male sailor. He was blacked out, sitting directly in front of the light. And there were 2 very distinctly disturbing features of the seated figure. One, he sat otherworldly still. It was as though he were made of stone. His uniform fluttered around him in the breeze, but his form did not even sway. 2, he had no head. It could not have been slumped down. It was not there. I know it's hard to explain, but the more alarming thing about him was his stillness, and not his absence of a head. So, here's the thing. About a week prior, my best friend came up to me and asked if I'd heard the medical emergency over the PA the prior night. I had, but I knew I didn't have to muster, so I went directly back to sleep. It was super late. Or super early. Either way, sleep was coveted out to sea. And usually, when we were underway, a medical emergency meant that someone had knocked themselves out on a plane wing. She told me that a sailor we both knew had hanged himself back aft. He and his GF were inseparable on the ship. But she ended up getting orders off the ship in Guam, we were stationed in Japan. Upon receiving orders, and, presumably, knowing they were too young to make some lifelong decision, she broke up with him. Anyway, I'm a skeptic. I don't know what I saw, but I kinda do. It would have been written off as exhaustion, too, had it not been pointed out to me by another shipmate. Anyway, that's my freakiest encounter. When I was a child, maybe around 7 or 8 years old, something really weird happened one Saturday night. I was with my 2 brothers in my living room, horsing around. They liked to tease me about my weight because that's what brothers do. They were jokingly trying to get me on the scale to see how much I weighed. So one of them has me by my legs, The other has me by my hands, essentially dragging me across the hardwood floor. This was just a normal weekend night for us. Now what happens next is where this gets freaky. Now what happened next, from my recollection, was both of them running out of the room in absolute terror. So what happened was, when my older brother was dragging me by my feet, my other brother let go of my hands. And my body became weightless. Like a feather. So at this point, they're both looking at my body hovering a couple inches off the ground, completely straight like a board. What was weird about this on my part was the fact that I was put in a trance while I was floating and awakened only after they ran out of the room. I simply just got up and followed them out to the hallway. I wasn't scared. I wasn't freaking out like they were. I believed what they were saying because there was no denying it really, but I still didn't feel any fear whatsoever. I didn't really feel anything. Not even confused. They were trying to put together what the fuck just happened. It's weird though, when I woke up from this state, it's like the whole entire house was in complete silence. Like more quiet than possible. That only lasted for a few seconds though. Then everything went back to normal and I heard them freaking out in the hallway. To this day we don't have a logical explanation for this. I got chills writing this. I've had a lot of experiences that would lead me to point at something supernatural. At one stage, I lived in an apartment I'm sure was haunted. It was a 1960s construction, with a rather tumultuous history that delved into some grim stuff, like a murder in one unit. My unit was okay, no weird stuff had really ever happened there, but in the unit right below mine, an elderly man had passed away in 2013. Something to do with a fire in the unit. I always felt uneasy while living there, like I could never properly relax. Sometimes it felt like someone was watching me, but upon inspection, I was always alone. A few times, it got a bit creepy. I'd hear clunks and thuds when the units around me were vacant. It always seemed to come from the attic. I was the top unit, and the attic was sealed off and unused, with no external access. My bedroom door would randomly shift on its hinges. Any weird feeling or experience I had was always worst at night. A few months before I moved, I woke up around 1 a.m. feeling like someone was in the unit with me. I went room by room and found nothing out of place. Checked all of my windows and my front door. Even checked the attic access, and found it still sealed up. I couldn't explain why I'd felt like that, only that it felt like somebody was visiting me. After I checked, the feeling went away. The absolute weirdest experience I had there had to be the time I was chilling in my living room, around 2 a.m., worked graveyard shift at the time, watching a movie. My cat was sleeping on my lap. From out of the blue, the TV started cutting in and out. Going from movie to static, I mean. The cat went from dead sleep to a hissing ball of terror in an instant, as he clawed me half to death while evacuating my lap. He was normally a very gentle and mellow cat, and wouldn't so much as even bite me. A second later I felt like someone had punched me, without hitting me. It's hard to describe, and all I can tell you is that it felt like a proper bloody ghost had punched me. It got oddly cold for a moment, then everything was fine. Telly stopped cutting out, and a while later, the cat came out of hiding. It was a summer's night, and I hadn't been running the AC in hours. It was still around 85 degrees Fahrenheit out. Still have no explanation for the cold breeze. Years ago I was a barista at a 100-year-old hotel that was turned into a residential loft complex. The place had a lot of weird statues and artwork, along with a disturbing amount of suicides. I was the opening shift supervisor, so I always had to get there at around 5:30. In the 3 years that I worked there, I hardly ever saw any residents in the lobby that early. Hell, the concierges were hardly ever there that early. So imagine my surprise as I'm walking through the lobby, and someone calls out to me. I turn around and there was an absolutely gorgeous woman standing about 3 feet away from me, but she is absolutely soaking wet and shivering. The lobby is relatively large and open, so it was already unusual that she managed to sneak up on me. On top of that, she's wearing nothing but her bra and underwear, not a swimsuit. She asks me if there's a way to adjust the temperature in the pool, which is all the way downstairs in the basement, which you can't get to without an access key. There's absolutely no way she had an access key on her. I know this because I was enamored by her half-naked body. Me being half awake, I simply reply I'll ask George, the concierge, when he gets in. I turn and go about my business for 30 minutes, before coming back to see if George made it in. I asked George if he could adjust the temperature for the young lady in the pool, and he gives me a blank look before asking what young lady. The half-naked chick who was here dripping water everywhere about half an hour ago. I got here shortly after you did, we're the only ones who have stepped in the lobby this morning. He saw the perplexed look on my face, and knew I was being serious. We walk across the lobby to the absolutely massive rug that covers about 40% of the floor. There isn't a single wet spot on the rug, or even wet footprints leading to the elevator. Not wanting to seem crazy, I asked George to play back the footage on the cameras, to prove I had spoken to this mystery woman. The footage shows me strolling across the lobby, pausing to turn around for a moment, and then going into the coffee shop. Even worse, the only key cards scanned that morning were mine and George's. There is a chance the mystery lady was just a delusion in my young sleep-deprived mind, but I still choose to believe I had encountered a spirit that refused to pass on to the other side. Now, I have semi-believed in supernatural stuff as in it's there, but leave it alone kind of deal. I have not seen/felt anything that could not be explained or chalked up to a dream or dream-like state. That changed later. That being said, some background. My stepmother, father, and siblings have expressed seeing things in our house. A child with blonde hair, no idea on gender, a young lady with dark hair, and an older gentleman. Others have seen other things, but these are, let's call them, reoccurring customers. My stepmother told me that the lady with dark hair, despite looking grudge-wise, seems to follow company but is mostly docile. The older man is seen, but seen ignoring us. The child with blonde hair, however, has been seen as older in both man and woman form and is believed to be the same entity. They will be important later, as I was not told that it is believed to be some kind of demon or demon-like thing. The house has been saged multiple times, like once every 2 months that I've seen. Others have brought in some kind of spiritual metal bowl to be rung a few times in every room, etc. On one part of the house, our room with the closet is always given the wrong vibe. The vibe gets worse in/near the closet. My stepmother explained it to me that emotions work as an anchor for these kinds of things. Makes sense. Our house has always had 10 to 12 people living in it, and metal breakdowns, not real ones, just a lot of arguments/crying, became a daily/hourly thing for 6 years. All 3 occupants of that room were not mentally unstable, but they were prone to drama and big emotional meltdowns. I was also told, because I asked, that I have seen so little of the ghosts because I do not let my emotions get to me, and everyone in the house does. My father and stepmother want to leave for a mini vacation for a week. The kids were dropped off at their mother's. Some of us older ones stayed with their respectives for the time, but I had a job, was 19, and did not want to be locked in a house with my mother, so I stayed alone in the house. Everyone left and I only left the house for work. I normally got back from work at about nighttime or just before sundown. The house is 2 stories and I did not turn on any lights as I walked about the house. So, unless I was cooking, I walked up and down the stairs, normally from my room to the fridge, and mostly black. Years ago, I did not want to be scared of the dark, so I walked in the dark while fighting the urge to move quickly. It worked well, and over time I gave no thought to being in the dark. About 5 to 6 days into the week, I walked downstairs to get a drink. The only light I got was from my room, but it did let you see half the staircase and faint outlines downstairs. So, I can find the fridge. I was getting a drink, completely engrossed in thought about the game I was playing on my PC. As I headed up the stairs, I felt frozen in place. By far, the strongest level of dread and anxiety I have ever felt. I couldn't move. Normally, anxiety for me is directionless, but this one had a direction. Behind me. Gritting my teeth, I was barely able to turn my head. I saw a face with blonde hair, but I do not remember any other features. Despite being locked in dread, I was furious. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked 3 times on the first word, and that only got me angrier. I said, "Leave me alone," practically screaming the "me alone" part. What followed, I still cannot explain too well, but will still try. It felt like a wave, entirely 3-dimensional, pushing off of me. The very second after that, I started yelling. Telling it to fuck off, daring it to again, calling it an asshole, you name it. But before I knew it, I was sitting in my chair. I remember wanting to continue to walk to my room, I remember the steps I made, and I remember the time spent/things said, but I do not remember everything I saw from that point to my room. That was the first time I went into a literal blind rage, and also the only time where I lost only vision. I also managed to make all 4 turns from the staircase to my room. I told my family about this a week or 2 after they got back. My stepmother told me that she believes that this thing feeds off of negative energy, and when everyone left, it had nothing to feed on but me. She also said that I was likely not its kind of preferred or normal target, so it did not go well. I think that if I did not get furious when I did, I would have lost the fight. If I can call it that. Me and my GF was coming home from a birthday party late at night. We had already talked with my sister about spending the night over at her place. So we came in late, and I remember I told my GF, "Remember, they are probably sleeping, so we need to be quiet." We went inside and whispered to each other about how lovely the birthday party was when we suddenly heard really loud coming from upstairs where all the bedrooms were. We were both stunned and turned to each other and said at the same time, "Did you hear that?" The voice was not even remotely familiar, sounded like an elderly woman. I went to check to see if anyone was standing at the top of the stairs, but no one was there. It was really creepy. You had the feeling like you were being watched and no one answered when we tried to talk back, and it was all we talked about that night. The next day, we told my sister what we heard and she told us that she had noticed a lot of strange things happening in the house, that she too is creeped out, and an elderly woman made sense. She asked us if she sounded mean and I told her no, she sounded very gentle, but it was freaky as hell. My sister thought it could be a woman that lived there before she bought the place, because the woman didn't want to move out and sat in the stairs crying apparently. And she was very gentle yet too old to be living alone. Okay, so for legal reasons I'm not saying where exactly this is, but there are lots of bunkers in Sweden, and where I live they do tours of them. And whenever they aren't being visited they are locked with a simple lock and a chain around the handles, double doors. I decided that I wanted to explore the bunker in my own time without the squabble of people, so I broke in. Obviously yes, this was very stupid, and if I would have been caught I'd be in jail. Don't break into bunkers, dum-dums. I cut the chain and picked the lock, and just like that I was in. I turned my headlamp on and in I went. It was pretty standard. A small room with protective clothing hanging on hooks and stairs going downwards. I propped the door open with a big stone and headed down the stairs. There was a room with sleeping cots and a few desks. There was one of those poles with ropes between them thingies, so you knew not to cross into there and disturb history. Needless to say, I decided to disturb history. Right as I sat down in one of the rickety chairs by the desk furthest away from the stairs, just a few feet from the stairs, the door slammed shut. Needless to say, I almost shat myself, but calmed down since I had a crowbar in case I needed to break in or out of anywhere. I continued rummaging until I heard footsteps descending the stairs. Obviously I got spooked again and under the desk and pulled the chair in as it had been before. When it sounded like the footsteps were at the bottom of the stairs, I slowly peeked out from the desk only to see there was nothing there. At this point I had had enough and got out from my genius hiding spot, placed everything where it was and headed for the stairs. As I took my first step on the stairs, the chair that I just sat in creaked as if someone sat down. I bolted up the stairs, threw myself at the door and got out into the dark night. The stone I had propped the door open with was gone, and I threw the door shut, and as it swung shut, I heard it lock. I have never run as fast as I was that night when running home. Once again, don't break into bunkers, dum-dums. I lived in the middle of nowhere in Ireland growing up. A friend and I were camping outside in our field. We hear this singing in the middle of the night. My friend unzips the tent and looks out. He wakes me up and tells me to come look. There in the middle of the field is a woman. Pure white skin, blonde hair, dress made of some really light flowing fabric. Tunic-like. She's walking slowly across the field singing in Gaelic. I still have everything burned in my mind, from how she looked to how she sounded. Her voice was light but yet kind of raspy. Everything about her was ephemeral. My friend wanted to go talk to her. I pulled him back into the tent and we ended up hiding in our sleeping bags till the next morning. I'm almost 100% sure it was a fae. We were too far away from other people for it to have been a random person. Another one is I saw a ball of light over a nearby field another night. It hovered about 10 feet off the ground and then sped off over the field ridiculously fast. Then it disappeared into a hedge. No idea what it was. I'm a skeptic when it comes to ghosts, aliens, monsters, etc. But I'm a believer when it comes to the fae. Those fuckers are real, and they ain't the little Tinkerbell-like things. Fae are tall, beautiful and dangerous. So basically my family heavily believes that when someone passes away, they come back as something else. On my grandpa's last day, he said he would come back as a white butterfly. He knew exactly when he was going to die. He may have been somewhat psychic. A few days before, his doctor told him he would pass away in 2 to 3 days, but he corrected him saying he would die in 5 days, exact, and he did just that. The following is what my grandma told me. I was about 5 or 6 around the time. The rest of my family and I were quite devastated when he died. But as we were leaving the hospital, the most interesting thing happened in front of my grandma's eyes. Apparently little 5 to 6-year-old me was surrounded by white butterflies. Being the giggly child I was laughing at all the butterflies around me. Just as my grandpa said before dying, he'd come back as a white butterfly. So this was confirming our belief that people come back as something else after death. My grandma said that the butterflies just disappeared into thin air before her and my aunt's eyes. Yes, my aunt saw it all too. They both recently talked about it. I'm almost 17 now and so many things are increasing my beliefs in the supernatural. The rest of my family too also believes in it. I was a teenager reading in the living room one day when my mother came out of her bedroom looking shaken. I asked her what was wrong and she said she was laying in bed reading when she distinctly heard an old friend of hers, Helen, say "It's okay, honey." They were very close, but hadn't spoken in about 6 months as Helen lived in another state. Freaked out, she called Helen's house a couple of times. No answer. Helen lived in a rural area, and so on a hunch she called the local hospital and asked for her, whereupon she was put through to her room. A nurse answered and asked who she was, and Helen's husband then came on telling my mother she had passed away 10 minutes earlier from an aggressive cancer that had come out of nowhere a few months before. Helen hadn't wanted to worry my mother, so she didn't tell her. No way to fake it, no reason to. Witnessing the whole thing was direct proof for me there was some kind of afterlife I hadn't believed in until that moment. No idea what to think now. I'm not religious, but there is something. I'm Native American, enrolled to the Crow tribe. So the supernatural stuff isn't really creepy to us, cause we know there are spirits upon this earth with us. As a kid I heard many stories of these types of stuff, so I never fear anything unnatural, but instead respect them and know they are true. Anyways, when I was a kid, my uncles, brothers and I all went fishing one time at Fort Smith, Mount. It's a beautiful place to fish and stuff, and a well-known fishing spot. We spent the whole day fishing there from about noon till it was time to leave. The sun was setting, and the sky started turning its gray color. Just as this was happening, my uncle said, "Do you hear that?" And I stopped what I was doing and started listening for something. In a distance I could hear a drum beating in a double beat, the type of sound you'll hear at a powwow, but instead with no song. We sat there for just a minute or two listening. As it flowed with the river the drum gotten louder and sounded closer. My uncle said it was time to go. So we got all of our food that we brought with us, and threw it all in the river as a gift to them for letting us fish. I asked them who or what they were, and they told me it was the water people. Usually this type of stuff is creepy and scares one, but it fascinates me and I love to know these spirits and unnatural things are real and alive. When I lived in Italy, I was helping a Nigerian man who lived there with a few things. His son had been a troublemaker and part of my job at the time was to help put together a plan on how to make things better for him at home. Whenever I come over it seems like a perfect home life, but the son, 17 years, hated being there and never said why. As I come over more often, it starts to seem a little surreal. Then the dad, who'd been incredibly friendly, said something about my sister at home when I realized I never told him about my sister. The second I realized that, despite saying nothing, everything felt off and weird and the dad was very hostile. Once I got home I thought on it a lot and felt very unsettled. I called the next week to cancel our appointment cause it felt wrong and the dad was outright hostile and aggressive toward me. The following week I had a quick appointment with another Nigerian man who I had been friends with for over a year. He told me, as I was about to leave, to be careful because there was darkness around me. I hadn't said anything, but I was going to see the father and his son. I was sweating and anxious as I knocked on the door, and the dad opened up with an angry look on his face. Without saying a word he shoved me hard enough to knock me down. He started walking toward me and behind him I could see into the apartment which looked nothing like I remembered. Paint was peeling from the walls and the place looked disgusting and smelled foul, even from 6+ feet away. I stood up and shoved him back, and called for his son, immediately worried about him. The son came into view as the father got up and looked like he was going to leap for me. The son yelled "Go!" And I ran. I felt dirty after and called the cops, but they found nothing at the apartment. My Nigerian friend told me that the man was definitely a witch doctor or something and it was hard to believe at first, but now I can't help but wonder. A few years ago I was camping out in the woods of Wisconsin and I decided to sleep in a hammock overnight. At some point I woke up cause I thought I heard something moving but I dismissed it as some animal. I'm in the middle of the woods so it made sense. I started to go back to sleep but I started to hear something else that really freaked me out. It was the distinct sound of someone breathing right next to me. I was really scared but I couldn't see who it was because I slept with part of a sleeping bag over my head. I just tried to stay quiet and hope it would stop but after a long time I still heard it. I like to face my fears so I tried to slowly get out of the hammock and see what was there. Unfortunately the hammock was pretty small and instead of slowly getting out I just fell straight to the ground. I was terrified that I would look up and see someone but there was nobody there. It was basically pitch black around me so I didn't bother to go search. Instead I just got back in the hammock and tried to fall asleep. I was awake for most of the night after that but I never heard the breathing again. Still kinda freaks me out today. When I was young, probably 10 to 11 years old, I fell sick and my mom let me stay home. I never really slept in my room at that age, always choosing to sleep in my brother's room or my parents' room instead. So as I am homesick, my mom was tucking me into her bed so I can watch TV and she was getting ready to go to work. She kisses me on the forehead, and turns around and makes her way out of the room. When she turns around, instantly the TV sound faded and became a loud humming sound. My jaw dropped and the most overwhelming sense of dread and fear came over me. I have been chased by big dogs, had my leg stuck while underwater, and been alone in the woods while seeing what I thought was a bear, but nothing has ever come close to the fear I felt in this moment with my mom. I don't even understand what caused it. I know when she turned around to leave, the fear started and I can't remember even seeing her leave. My entire senses were wiped to leave me with just fear and dread. Jaw wide open the whole time, when suddenly the fear comes to an abrupt head when the closet door to my left opens, and I suddenly could understand what was going on and that I was scared. Never have I ran faster in my life to my mom, who was just about out the house. That wonderful woman stayed home from work because of how shaken I was. She does remember I always told her to close the doors in any room I was in, always scared me, and that the door was open when she remembers closing it. Not sure if this really fit the question well, but I need to know if this has ever happened to anyone. Nothing triggered my fear, and it was the most overwhelming feeling I have ever felt in my life. Then something scary happened which scared me, but the fear was less overwhelming and I could control what I thought and did. I will never forget this. When I was still dating my ex, we traveled to a fairly well-known spot in Brazil where folks say there are UFOs, magical quartz caves, good spirits, and the like. This spot is also famous for its natural beauty, waterfalls, hiking spots, mountains, and for being pretty much a popular stoner's destination. I was there for the natural beauty and because I had never traveled without my family. She was there for the natural beauty and the weird spiritual vibe that came from smoking marijuana atop a pyramid watching the sunset. We made reservations for 5 days at a local hostel and it was pretty much fantastic. We visited waterfalls, watched the sunset more than once, had fun at the local bars, enjoyed the local cuisine. The region is also famous for its traditional cooking, and even made fast friends with a couple that was there also on vacations. We hitched some rides, walked pretty much everywhere. Everything felt safe, everything felt nice. And me, being the stupid guy I am, suggested we should wake up early the morning of the 4th day to watch the sunrise. She agreed. There was a mountaintop 20 minutes away that would be perfect, it sounded safe, and if the sunset was amazing, just imagine what the sunrise is like. We went to bed, had some fun, we both fell asleep. And then, I wake up at 3 in the morning. I wake up, sit, and the only thing in my head is an alarm going grifo colio, there is something out of this hostel, wanting blood, and if you step outside now, you are going to die. I try to rationalize. I try to calm down. My body is tense, I feel as if my skin is hardening, all my hair is standing. I think about reaching for the light switch, but the alarm in my head is still on. Grifo colio, you do not want to move, it will follow, you are only safe if you stay right where you are. My blood is curling, I am cold to the touch. There is just this dread I can't source. My eyes are squinting, I am almost crying. I look to the window, which is closed. I know something is waiting outside. A few years earlier, I saw my mother almost dead, passed out. I saw my brother with his forehead and chin pumping blood. I got knocked out while underwater in a pool. I had a guy hold me at knife point. Nothing ever felt as real and as terrorizing as that morning. Sat in my bed, knowing deep inside it that if I stepped out of that room, I'd die. My then girlfriend woke up, noticed I was tense, asked what was up. I said we should not get out of the room till sunrise. That I knew something bad would happen. She agreed and went back to sleep. We never touched again on the subject. We enjoyed the remaining of the 4th and 5th days, and the dread was gone. We went back to our regular lives. We broke up somewhere in May, 2015. I told some friends of the travel, never spoke about the dread I felt that morning. Then a friend of mine decided to go. Enjoyed the hell out of it. Went with a girl he was seeing at the time. He was happy as a pig in shit when he got back. And a few months and some beers after that, he just said, you know, grifo colio, it was amazing, but there was something that got me worried. I had almost forgotten of the story by then, but the way he said it just made me remember everything. When I was near the wind portal, late into the night, I heard something talking. Our hostel room, when we visited, was near the wind portal. We did arrange to see the sunrise there. I felt the same sensations I had a year prior. I asked if he dreaded it. He just swallowed another beer can and replied, dead serious, I am pretty sure it was some kind of devil, trying to lure us, but I also am pretty sure that it must have been something else. It was talking to something, or someone, and I did not want to hear it. I just got out of there as fast as I could. I then proceeded to blurt out my story. Silence came afterwards. We went for a few more beers, went both to our homes afterwards. And we agreed that there was something wrong there. That this idyllic little town encrusted in the mountainside of Minas Gerais had something very good, but held also something very bad there. Something heinous, and hungry. If you guys ever want to travel there, it is called São Tomé das Letras. It is not difficult to get there, but takes quite a lot of time. It is a little, sympathetic town, with stone streets, 2 churches, maybe 2 or 3 bars, about a dozen waterfalls and some nice views. It also hosts a modern rustic pyramid built atop one of the mountains and many little stones that tourists stack as to say that they were there and did leave no trash behind. Ours must still be there, I think. But stay away from the wind portal at the dead of night. Something evil lurks there. I used to be an atheist, full skeptic, not believing in any remote chance of the supernatural. But that single experience made me worry that maybe there are some things we do not know, and, among these, some that which we are not meant to.